Hey guys, this is Jesse Horton with Cowboys of the Cross and today's Short Go. When I see livestock, I usually see them behind a fence. And that's because within the boundaries of that fence, they find pasture where they have food, water, shelter, shade, protection from vehicles driving by and possible animal attacks. So inside that pasture, they find enough protection, enough safety that their owners, their master, can leave them alone for long periods of time and not have to watch over them every moment of every day. Now, it wasn't always like that. In fact, in biblical times, what we see is a lot less fencing and a lot more shepherds. A shepherd was someone who watched over the flock, who stayed with the livestock almost constantly and would lead them to places where they could find safely water and food and shelter and protection. But you never saw, either today or back then, livestock being completely left alone, because that's not a desirable situation. And in fact, the Bible tells us that's not a realistic situation even for us. The Bible tells us that we are either slaves to sin or slaves to righteousness. There is no in between. There are no other options. And in fact, the only way we get loose from being slaves to sin is when Jesus comes into our lives and gives us eyes to see, ears to hear, and hearts to feel him. And then he moves us outside of that pasture for sin. He snips the fence and lets us out so that we can follow him, the good shepherd, and he can lead us and guide us around. Yeah, there's still lots of sin, and he guides us around it. He guides us through it safely if we follow him. And I want you to see that as we read Romans chapter 6, verses 11 through 18. The Apostle Paul says this to the Roman Christians: "In the same way, count yourselves dead to sin, but alive to God in Christ Jesus. Therefore, because you are dead to sin and alive to God in Christ Jesus, do not let sin reign in your mortal body so that you obey its evil desires. Do not offer any part of yourself to sin as an instrument of wickedness, but rather offer yourselves to God as those who have been brought from death to life. And offer every part of yourself to him as an instrument of righteousness. For sin shall no longer be your master, because you are not under the law, but under grace. What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law, but under grace? By no means. Don't you know that when you offer yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey? Whether you are slaves to sin, which leads to death, or to obedience, which leads to righteousness. But thanks be to God, though you used to be slaves to sin, you have come to obey from your heart the pattern of teaching that has now claimed your allegiance. You have been set free from sin and have become slaves to righteousness." You see, a lot of people just misunderstand what it means to have free will as a human being. Yes, God gave us free will. And if we were left without the human condition, without our sinful human condition, then we would be able to choose either sin or righteousness. But as it is, because we are born in sin, we don't have the choice to choose anything but sin. The pasture where we live inside those boundaries has nothing but sin for us. We can't choose anything else until the good shepherd comes, snips the wires, and says, "Come and follow me." Now, we don't live in a world where there's no sin. We live in a world where we can follow the shepherd and navigate around sin and be his slaves and see righteousness produced in our lives. You see, one of the points that Paul is making here is that when you constantly choose to submit yourself to sin, what you're doing is you're giving evidence that you haven't chosen to follow Jesus as your master. Does that mean you'll be sinless when you choose to follow Jesus? Absolutely not. But your pattern of behavior will be to follow the shepherd. You're not going to lose him. You're not going to lose sight of him. He's not going to have to come running to find you because you're always listening to his voice. Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice and they follow me. Who are you following? Who are you submitted to? What would your pattern of life say? Now, choosing the right path doesn't mean you've chosen the shepherd. Choosing the shepherd means you're on the right path. There's a big difference. Pray you would follow the shepherd today.